Welcome to Marriage IQ, the podcast for the intelligent spouse.
I'm Dr. Heidi Hastings.
And I'm Dr. Scott Hastings.
We are two doctors, two researchers, two spouses, two lovers, and two incredibly different human beings coming together for one purpose: to transform the stinky parts of your marriage into scintillating ones, using intelligence mixed with a little fun.
Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode. We're picking up where we left off last time with Mark and Janie Ogletree. Mark has been a therapist for over, 30 years? And we're tapping some of his knowledge along with his wife, Janie. They've raised 8 children together, and we're just excited to have them back.
We love how we get the clinical experience, the research experience, and the real life experience with this duo. They're really great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah. So how do you see time-starved marriages impacting mental health?
Well, I think that's a great question. You know, when you think of a marriage that's healthy and a couple who's spending a lot of time together and they're basically refueling each other and replenishing each other, there's great energy that comes from that relationship. When that marriage relationship is time-starved, now needs aren't being met. And when needs aren't being met, this is where stress can start creeping in, and frustration and even anger. Well, just the word mental health, that's a really broad term, but all of our own mental health could be at risk just from stress, right? Just from the stress that we have and just from the frustration and anger that we feel. And when you have unmet needs in any relationship, often anger is the result. That anger doesn't always come out just outwardly. It could be really inward, which a lot of people will say, well, that's what depression is, when that anger turns inside. And so, yes, certainly a time-starved marriage could impact mental health, just as a healthy, happy marriage can affect mental health in such a positive way.
And would you say that busyness factor also really can contribute to anxiety?
Yes. My wife can probably write a whole book on that, right, honey?
Just from watching you.
Yeah. I think once again, when you're so busy and you're not replenishing yourself with what we all need, and I would say people certainly need physical exercise, which is one of the first things to go when people get busy. People need to be grounded in some way. And if that's a spiritual way, like it is for a lot of us, then that becomes crucial. And that's also something that tends to go by the wayside when we're over busy. And so there are a lot of factors like that contribute for sure to our marriages, to our mental health, to this time-starved idea.
So this whole idea of busy, I just want to unpack it a little bit, Mark, because when you say the word busy, it conjures up doing something all the time. And it's interesting when you bring this word up, busy, that we're busy all the time, which I don't deny that that's true. However, in my practice as a physician, when I talk about the importance of exercise, which the vast majority of people don't do, they talk about they're just too busy. They're too busy. I could go on with diet, but I'm going to stick with exercise for right now.
Yeah.
So I sit there thinking, I own my own business. Oh, we do. I'm a full-time physician. I'm on call 24/7. I do a freaking marriage podcast on the weekends. I'm pretty busy. And yet I find time to do exercise every morning. And so I'm wondering about this word and this idea of busyness. Is it true? Is the story I'm telling myself actually reality? And so I'll sit there with my patients and go through some of their schedule, if we have time, and find, oh, yeah, I got 20 minutes here. So is it that you're really too busy, or you just really don't want to do it?
Yeah.
And so it's hard because I think we wear that term busyness as like a badge of honor. I'm so busy.
It's a status symbol, isn't it?
And so just to take a moment there on that word busy, because going back to marriage, we're so busy with our kids, with all these things going on. I'd like to look at all these people, put a hidden camera on their life, and see how much time they actually have as downtime. And I think I know they will be shocked because we've done studies on these things, and we know that people's perception of their time and what they do with their life and the busyness they have is actually far, far
Exaggerated or
exaggerated, over exaggerated by a significant amount. So, anyway, we do have time to put on our marriage,
yeah,
right?
we actually do. What's your
And on
take
our
on
grounding, on our
Yeah,
mental
to be
health.
intentional, to find time to put all this into action so we can avoid anxiety because anxiety is basically a condition of reactivity. Yes, it's fear about the future, but it's also a highly reactive type of
Yeah.
condition.
Nervous system.
And when we're thinking we're busy all the time and we just spend our entire lives reacting to things, that's not going to be a good starting point for healthy mental health, right?
Yeah. And what I would say, I think, first of all, Scott, good take on that. I think busyness is a relative term, no question about it. In fact, I remember when we were early on married, I bet we'd been married for a few months. And Janie's dad called me one day. We were talking on the phone. He said, "How's it going?" I go, "Oh my gosh, it's just so busy." And he started laughing. He just started laughing. Here we were, college student, no kid, just in college and working. And here he is laughing with eight kids of his own, going in every direction. But yeah, busyness is a relative term, no question about it. Just as people, we've all noticed this, but people spend their money on different things, right? Have you ever been surprised by that where you're like, wow, these people have all this money, but they don't seem to do this or this or this? It's the same way with busyness, I think. And that is that we all focus in different areas and we think that we're so busy. I've heard people tell me how busy they are, and then you find out they wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning. You're not busy. If you're waking up at 10 o'clock, you're not a busy person.
But they were up at 3 o'clock in the morning getting their flights.
Yes, or something like that maybe, but yeah, so I do, I think that priorities drive all of that. What is it that we really care about? If exercise is a real priority, you'll do it, right? If your family is a top priority, really, because we know that's the right answer to say our marriage and family at the top of the list, but are they really if we never spend time with our spouses or our children? No, that's not your
Yeah.
priority. And so I think aligning our desires and priorities are crucial. But busyness is a relative it's a relative term.
I
Yeah.
like what you said, that it's the new status symbol, that's the first thing. "How are you doing?" "Oh, so busy." And I think it's like a thing in our culture now that if you're not busy, you're unproductive or you're not accomplishing. But I like what you said. I mean, so many people, they have time for golf, but, they don't have time to spend with their wife, or they have time.
For Facebook or Instagram or whatever.
Yeah, the hours we spend, mindlessly scrolling, that if
Right.
we took that time for our priorities, I
It's
think.
So
always amazing when we pick our phones up and see that the little gauge that tells us how much we've been on social media that week, like, there's no
Yeah.
possible way. And it's like 12 hours or whatever.
yeah.
Anyway.
That's good. I
So
would like to drill down just a little bit more on mental health that perhaps isn't caused by busyness. It may be amplified by busyness, but in our family, we've got some mental health issues that come from a number of different things, from hormones, from traumatic circumstances, from uh, the
Genetics.
whether the genetics, whether the sun is shining or not.
Right,
Some
right.
of those things. And it can be truly a challenge to a lot of marriages when anxiety or depression or OCD or other bipolar are an issue in the marriage. Um, what's been your take on that as you've served as a therapist? How do you help couples in marriages, especially when one spouse has the mental illness and the other is either a caretaker or trying to fix them or trying to work around that?
Yeah. Let me just share with you, maybe I can answer two questions in the one that you asked. Number
Okay.
one, anxiety, stress, depression are at, all-time levels. I mean, research tells us that in every place you look, the generalized anxiety rate in our country runs about 30% right now
Oh,
with adults and youth. And so, and what's the cause of that? Well, part of the cause of that, in my mind, back to the global village, right? We can learn about every crazy thing in the world that's going on in 5 minutes. And, you know, in the 1950s, we would have never even heard of half of the things that are on the news today. So back to the global village idea of we brought everything right into our own personal lives and we have ready access to it. And it's causing crazy levels of stress and anxiety, especially among our youth, right? And in my mind, one of the best things parents can do today is equip their young people with grit and moxie and teach them how to do hard things because they're not learning those skills anymore. Kids don't work all
Mm.
summer mowing lawns like we did, you know, when we grew up and doing hard things like that. And so we need to introduce that. Otherwise, we're going to have a generation that's going to be in big, big trouble, you know, 20 years from now when people just can't handle anything. So
Mm.
there's part one. Part two is, you know, what do you do if you're in a marriage relationship? And Janie, please chime in on this one. But one of the greatest things that a spouse can do when the other spouse has mental health issues is number one, to be empathetic, you know, because a lot of times people, if you've never been depressed, really, like real depression, you don't get it. If you've
Yep.
never had real anxiety, you
Yep.
have no clue that you have a spouse who's actually trembling and shaking and they can't even breathe sometimes and they don't even know why. And if you have a spouse that's like, "Hey, buck up and get out there," that's not the answer to that. So we want empathy, but at the same time, I want a spouse that will push me. And Janie's been good at that because I have had my own anxiety bout, you know, of time or two in our marriage. She's been really good to say, "Okay, guess what? It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be totally fine." So
Mm.
a spouse that can also give reassurance, because
Mm.
if I present to her the worst case scenario in the world and she looks at me and says, "That's gonna be totally fine." She even told me that last night. I saw some crazy email about something and I go, "Man, should we do something about this?" She goes, "I'm not worried about that." I go, "Oh, okay." And I was totally, "Okay, I'm not worried either. If you're not worried, I'm not worried."
That's a very grounding presence, Janie. That's really
Right.
a great attribute.
She is. And she probably gets tired of it. But
No, but it like, he talked about in the beginning when Mark was first learning that he had anxiety, and it was kind of funny because he was treating people for anxiety, but
Mhm.
couldn't see it in himself, and
Mm.
I used to read the symptoms to people in my practice and go, "That is so funny. I have every one of these symptoms. But good thing I don't have anxiety, you know."
and
What are the symptoms?
Oh, you just on a general level?
Mhm.
Yeah, well, excessive worry and fear, for starters, irritability, not sleeping well. You know, you have a hard time sleeping, you have a hard time concentrating and focusing. Um,
heart racing.
yeah, you could have a racing heart, and there's 20 or 30 symptoms you can
Yeah.
really get into, but
Yeah,
those are
the
some of the
biggest ones.
general ones.
Mhm.
You know, like I said, I read that and go, "That's so funny. I have every one of those, but I don't have anxiety. Good thing."
'Cause you're functioning so well?
Yeah, I
Well,
Mm.
mean,
thought he was.
working 15-hour days, you know, and
Mm.
that was part of that. It ended up being part of the
Busyness.
problem, right?
Yeah, that
Is I
busyness.
was doing so much, I had quit exercising, I had quit whatever spiritual work I was doing at that time in my life to be grounded, because I was so busy, right?
Could you see it, Janie? You said he thought he was. Does that
Well,
mean
just
you
he's
could
always been a
recognize
high
it?
worrier, and I think he comes by that genetically, for sure, or it is at least was taught that, or genetically, I'm not sure how it passes down, but,
Mhm.
when it first manifested, I get a call one afternoon, and he was on his way to the ER saying he thought he was having a heart attack. So I raced to the ER, and the minute he gets to the ER, he's totally calm, he's totally cutting up and laughing with the nurses, and I was like, "Okay, I don't think you're having a heart attack."
I think we had an experience like that, didn't we?
Or two.
Or 2?
This is hard to hear, but go ahead, honey.
It happened again, probably another a month later, and I kept saying, "Mark, you have anxiety." "No, I don't. No, I don't." He didn't at the time, I mean, he didn't wanna be diagnosed, and I don't wanna speak for you, but he didn't wanna be diagnosed with something that he thought was a mental illness, which is
Mm.
now we know that it's not a mental illness.
We always tell people anxiety and depression, those are mood disorders. So many people are
Mm.
afraid to be diagnosed because in their mind it's next to schizophrenia or something, and it's not. It's a slight mood disorder that there's so much that we can do treatment wise, even without medicine. But in my mind, oh man, to have that next to my name, I didn't want to deal with that. Yeah.
A
Yeah,
stigma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one night we had stopped by his office on a after date on a Friday night. We were there about 10 o'clock, and he was trying to do some things on the computer, and he had a stack of books sitting there in his waiting room, and I was just looking through. The top book was an anxiety book. And I opened the page and there it was. And I was reading it. And I was like, you have every one of these. You have anxiety. And we had some really hard come to Jesus meetings, as we call it, it's some very intense, like, you've got to accept this.
Yeah.
And it took a while, but once he accepted it, then you can't acknowledge it. You can't address it. Right. And so finally we said, let's get on this. And I think it was
Good.
scary. It was scary for him to admit.
And then it was good. I mean, literally within a couple months, I felt back to normal, back to my normal self. And we had to change the lifestyle things, right? I was working 45 hours a week as a therapist at that
What?
point, every Saturday. I mean, it was just crazy. And so we had to make some changes. And
But I admit I was that spouse at first, and I was like, "Buck up, like, what's your problem?" Because I've never experienced that, and I couldn't relate. I'm like, I couldn't understand what he was going through.
she has experienced it since. She's had a couple of her own little small bouts with that. And she's like, I think I'm having a panic attack. And I'm like, I am so grateful. That is so, you need to have a good one at least once every 10 years. So you empathize a little bit.
Yeah, definitely made me more compassionate, empathetic, but yeah, at first I was just like, "Calm down, like, what's your problem?" Like that, it made no sense to me, and so but I've learned over the years to try it. Now some of our children have it, and trying to now learn to be empathetic, to listen, to be compassionate, to try to understand that what they're going through, they really feel it, like it's a
They're experiencing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think, Janie, you bring up a good point. I think that it's in every marriage because we do not marry ourselves. We marry someone different than ourselves for a reason. And the stories that we tell ourselves, the genetics that we come with, the life circumstances we all have are all different. And so, what you're proposing, it sounds very, very, very difficult in theory. On paper, it's this fine balance between giving just enough uh, pushback without going overboard and giving just enough uh, leeway without going overboard, right? With both your spouse and your children. And it's a lifetime we spend trying to fine tune this balance, right, with each other. And that's really one of the reasons why marriage works so well as an institution. That doesn't work for some people. I get that. But in real time, you're talking about how you had to adjust to him, to be both compassionate, empathetic, and still have him know that he does need to kind of giddy up a little,
And
right?
get help.
And yeah, and to be proactive, and vice versa, right? And it's always nice to, like, what Mark was saying, that hey, she's experienced something I had now. Hey, this is great. I love it. To at least have a taste of what it's like.
And I
Uh,
hope empathy too.
yeah.
I hope I hope it was followed by empathy.
yeah.
Well, it
So
was
it,
cool. Like, go, hey, honey, I know exactly what to do. Okay, here's what you got to do.
Yeah.
And it was helpful, I think, to her. So
and I think we just bump into each other over the course of years. We're just bumping, bumping, bumping. And through that bumping, it's like the river rolling, right? It just smooths out those edges of knowing how to fine tune our responses to our spouse, and live in a state of both empathy and proactivity, strength. Um, it's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, and that's one thing about having a good healthy marriage is there's times when I'm really low and he's my cheerleader, there's times when he's really low. I have to be his rock and his cheerleader, and I
Mhm.
think I think that's part of why the marriage is so great. You have someone to go through this crazy life with, but it's not easy. It's hard, and to learn. I mean, there's many times where I have flubbed. I've been like, come on, get up, buck up," where he needed empathy and compassion, and I should have taken the other approach. But you learn, and you grow, and yeah, like you said, rubbing off those rough edges. It's a whole learning experience.
What happened when you found out that you were too hard on him? How did that play out? How did you learn that you were too rough on him?
Um,
Or if you remember, I don't know.
I think I just told you.
I think he'll tell me, and with our children too.
I've even said, "Honey, that's not what I need right now."
Yeah, yeah,
That's very amazing, being able to
yeah,
speak what our needs are.
yeah.
Yeah.
Next time, then I'll try to approach the soft. But then sometimes I've just known I've had to say, like, buck up, like, stop worrying about that. We can't go there. And he usually, so a lot of times he'll just like, okay, okay, like,
Let's go.
I don't know. It's a balancing
And one
juggling.
thing, the good news is that's been 10 years ago. I mean, it's been so much better now, but I love the idea. This is maybe something we need to identify right here in the conversation, is that these are the type of things that can destroy a relationship, right? This
Right.
is where
Absolutely.
we reread the research, the couples have the disabled child, or they have the
Yep.
cancer, or the house burns down, and the couples go like this, they separate and they go different directions. And these are the opportunities really to draw actually closer to each other, to really learn about each other in depth, and talk about the yin and the yang of marriage. This is it right here, where
Yep.
when one is weak the other is strong, and vice versa, and we help each other through. That's what it's all about.
And when you're both weak in some of the cases that you've talked about, which some of those we've experienced as well, you still
Yeah.
turn to each other because you're
Right.
better together than you are alone.
And sometimes you don't turn to each other for a little while.
Yeah.
I found that that's actually that's normal. Uh and uh just the other day, remember? I said I got to take a break.
Yeah.
Uh
Scott, I can relate to that. Mark's a very, if we fight, he's immediately right there. I'm so, where I'm like, give me a few hours. I've got to get through my anger, then I can come back. But
yeah,
had to learn
John
that.
Gottman's 20
We're all
minutes doesn't
different.
do it.
Yeah, we're all.
I'm like, oh wait, I gotta go to my counseling office and tell people how to have happy marriages. I gotta solve this problem right now.
Right now.
Well,
And I'm like, not ready. I'm, and so we're just also different. Again, that's part of that whole learning curve. In there.
yeah. But it's funny though. I came back a few minutes later. I played a calming song and took some big breaths, and came back, and we did awesome. We rocked it. And that is such a beautiful story, because in the moment it doesn't feel beautiful, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't
absolutely.
feel beautiful. It feels really hard, and it feels rough and jagged.
yeah,
Mark,
true.
you write about anxiety as a superpower. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, this is great. I had a young man that grew up in our area in McKinney, Texas, that ended up teaching him at the university where I teach at. And one day he approached me. He had his own struggle with anxiety, and I'd actually been his therapist for a while. And he said, I had this great idea. We keep talking about anxiety as this great weakness, but to me, it's a strength. And he was giving examples. He's like, you ever notice that anxious people are the ones who get things done? Or
Mm.
that anxious people are sensitive to others. They actually recognize the guy whose car is pulled over on the side of the road. Or that anxious people are prepared because they're always thinking of what could go wrong. And we started making this list and came up with about 10 or 12 things where, oh, wow, anxiety really is. I mean, I know for me, it's been a great help in a lot of ways. It's helped me to be more sensitive to other people with challenges where I just didn't think that way. I was more like her, thinking, well, buck up, let's get going,
Have
And
faith. Just move on.
so it's kind of identifying where these weak spots can become strengths with any kind of mental health challenge. And for me, yeah, I recognize, wow, in my own life, I think I've been able to accomplish so much because I have lived under a lot of stress, or I have been extra sensitive to people because I've thought about that a lot. Wow, what they must be going through is horrible. I need to give them a call or whatever. And
Mhm.
you tend to just think in different ways when you're anxious. And so now let's accept what some of these weaknesses are, but also recognize, wow, this is a strength. Why am I fighting against this and feeling like it's such a stigma when in reality it's made me who I am, and it's helped me become a better person in a lot of ways.
So it sounds to me like, Mark, you're teaching that we need to look at our lives, look at who we are in real time, not better, not worse, just reality as it stands. And that includes anxiety. As it's a label, right? But it doesn't mean anything other than it's what it is. And to acknowledge okay, there are maybe some negatives here, but some positives too. Because yeah, you brought up some points too that those are very interesting and positive points that I think people who have anxiety, whether it's genetic or environmental, um, to look at that and say, yeah,
Yeah, what
yeah,
are
they're
some of the strengths that come from this?
yeah,
Over the years, as I've watched him, at first he was having panic, with ending up in the ER, having panic attacks on an airplane, things like that. And
Mm,
as I've watched him over the years conquer them, get the help. That's the great thing about anxiety is that you can master it. You can get on top of it. Doesn't mean it's not there and you won't flare up, but you can learn there are techniques, there's ways to overcome it. He's now used that to bless other people's lives on how to help them. He's used it. I mean, it's amazing to me to watch him now be a rock and help other people and have totally conquered it in his life, and to me, that's amazing.
yeah. I think that's really how life works is if we can take the really hard things that we've gone through on an individual or on a couple level and use those to, well, first figure them out and then use those to help other people in ways that they wouldn't have that information otherwise is really gives so much meaning to life.
Yeah, and then you have a podcast.
Right.
That's
Well,
like the next step
exactly.
after you figure it out.
So my first marriage ended in divorce, and it was interesting when I taught a college level class on how to have good marriages, how to prepare for marriages, healthy marital relationships, for them to have that perspective of, look, here are some things that made it so it didn't work. And we
Yeah,
bring things like that into our podcast sometimes as well. We tried to do things very differently in our marriage. Mm.
sure, you bet.
And intentionality.
that's one of our 4 cornerstones, intentionality.
It's been a big thing that we've talked about
We've
here
talked about
today.
that today. Yep.
Oh, that's great.
Well, is there any wisdom that you would leave with us as we're coming to the close of this episode?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I just think that everyone's gonna have challenges in their life. There's no one's gonna get out of this life without significant trials and obstacles to go through, but to have someone that you can go through those together, to become a team, to forge this great identity, and to let those difficult things that happen in a marriage actually make it better and stronger and closer and then better for other people. I love what you guys said. I've always believed that when we have significant problems in our life, if we can learn from those and start mastering those problems, now we're in a position to help others. And like Janie said, it's been amazing how many people, even in our own family, we even have some grandchildren now that struggle with anxiety that we know how to help them. I just love the idea that we get strong and then we can reach out and help those around us and to have a marriage that's built on significant challenge and trial is a super strong marriage.
We just told uh, one of our kids and their spouse that last night, didn't we? They've gone
Indeed.
through a lot of significant trials, and we just said, this is a superpower. This is really good because it will prepare you much better than those couples who are just sailing along and not having any
Yeah,
bumps in the road.
yeah. We're grateful for those things that have happened in our lives, that we've had to make it our own way like so many have and scrap and save and
Yep.
Built with muscles and you come out tougher and stronger.
yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Janie? Any last words of wisdom?
I just echo everything that you guys have said. I just think back over the years, the hardships, the trials, the things that we've gone through. Yeah, you can draw closer to each other or you can turn away. And luckily, we've had moments where, but we come back and you work through it and you move on stronger and better than ever. And I think you have to fight for that every day. I don't think that's a one time thing. I think it's a daily. You have to prioritize it. You have to make it, you know, be
Yeah.
intentional.
Intentionality, our word of the day.
That's
Yes.
right.
Good. If our listeners are interested in learning more about what you two do or your podcast or your books or anything like that, where might they find you?
Yeah, so Preserving Families podcast is on pretty much all the iTunes, Spotify, even on YouTube now. And then preservingfamilies.org is the website. So
Great.
there's a lot of resources there and certainly happy to help anyone in any way we can. So
That's great.
That's Wonderful. This has been really amazing, and we're so grateful to have the two of you on today.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you both. We've learned a lot from you.
So, everybody, that's a wrap for this episode of Marriage IQ.
And remember that the intelligent spouse knows a scintillating marriage starts with first changing themselves.
And if you want to know more, join Marriage IQ on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
And grab your free ebook, sign up for exclusive tips at marriageiq.com. And please, please, please take a moment to rate, subscribe, follow Marriage IQ wherever you listen or watch. We'd love that. Email us at hello@marriageiq.com and we will answer you.
And we would love to hear suggestions that you have for future episodes as well. Invite your friends and family to join the Marriage IQ community too. So everybody, we'll see you next time on another exciting episode of
Marriage IQ.